There's three pillars to sleep. One is environment, because that little worm doesn't have a brain. And as much as that feels amazing as you're laying in bed with your head spinning, it doesn't have a prefrontal cortex to spin. The language of your brain when it comes to sleep is 100% the environment.
You're going to give us some amazing tips of how to sleep better and the benefits from doing that. So I'm fired up.
Yeah, fatigue is a big deal. And I think a lot of people try like hell to try to get some decent sleep. And they just go to bed with their eyes wide open, their brain's going crazy. And even if they're trying to get 8 hours like they think they're supposed to, and I know that you're going to talk about different things like, taking deep breaths or meditation or, the temperature in the room is a big deal. Like I wrote a book called The Big Picture, and I talk a lot about what my bedroom looks like, my mattress and my pillow and my sheets and no electronics in there and pitch black. I mean, that's my thing. A lot of people like a little ambient noise. That's, for me, it's like, I would live in a cave in the center of the earth. That's the quietest place.
Honestly, cavemen had it right. So living in a cave is not that wrong. So, I think that's a great segue into, how does sleep work? And the first thing we need to know about sleep is, and if I give a talk and there's got to be a PowerPoint or a presentation, I show this really ugly little marine worm that's basically magnified, and it's a circle ball with little funny feelers all over it. And even with 700 million years of evolution, we still use the same melatonin regulation system as that marine worm. So when you start to think about what are the basics of sleep, sleep is really old. And so how our brain needs to function and how that mechanism works really is down to simplicity. But to your point, if you don't get it, it's really hard. So where I start is there's three pillars to sleep. One is environment, because that little worm doesn't have a brain. And as much as that feels amazing as you're laying in bed with your head spinning, it doesn't have a prefrontal cortex to spin. All it can do
Right.
is respond to the light and the temperature change of the daily cycle. And that's where circadian rhythm is heavily entrained to that. It doesn't mean you can't hack it. It doesn't mean you can't work around that. And that's where we'll kind of talk about, does it have to be the same time? Does it have to
You
be
can hack the circadian cycle. Really?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So the language of your brain when it comes to sleep is 100% the environment. So between light and temperature most succinctly, your brain registers it in a way that is different than how you even feel, but it's looking for a change of temperature. And so there's been studies out of UCLA, Jerry Siegel did, where they tracked hunter-gatherer tribes, back to that caveman for over a year. And they didn't go to sleep the second it got dark. They were looking for dimming lights and getting softer lights, but they're looking for a change of temperature. They didn't sleep 8 hours. It was 6 to 7. There were different sleep segments they often had. Siesta in lots of cultures of the world is definitely a thing.
Chilling during the day, yeah.
Yep. Early Europeans would sleep sort of late afternoon when they'd come in from the fields, and then wake up around 10 or 11. You still see this happening in Spain, and then be social until like 10 till 1, even in the morning. And so there's all these different profiles for circadian rhythm, and lots of different ways to sleep. We just in our industrialized society think it's easiest to kind of focus on 8 hours from 10 to 6. But for lots of us, that's not very predictable or easy. And it doesn't mean that has to be. You can actually tell your brain it's time to go to sleep using temperature and sound and light, and turn that into a ritual. And that can help you get to sleep. But that's the environmental pillar. There's also behaviors, which we'll talk about, like working out and things like that, what you eat. And then the other one is mindset, because us humans do have a prefrontal cortex, and stress is by far the biggest enemy of sleep out there, 100%. And although there are not too many lions, and I think you even talk about this in sort of different things, but stress today is very rarely truly a lion about to rip your arm off. But most of us live in this state of being prepared for it. So when our body's stressed out, we actually, all the systems kind of batten down the hatches and stop doing the healing and taking care of ourselves, because we're ready to have our arm ripped off. We're ready to do this. We're going to do this. And when you're ramped up all the time, you can't relax, you can't unwind, and you certainly don't sleep very well.
Yeah, all true. Those are now it's interesting. If you don't mind, and I'm kind of digressing here a little bit. I don't know if everybody knows what the circadian cycle is. And can you explain that to folks? And And then B, you've touched upon it briefly about how different folks, different strokes have different cycles, and they can they don't need the 8, but sometimes they need 6 and 7 based on their lifestyle or culture or something. And then, can you kind of get into the weeds with that a little bit?
Yeah, so your circadian rhythm or cycle, there's lots of sort of different ways or terminology around it, but it's basically your body clock. And it's often tied to morning person or night owl or to sleep, but your clock is actually your clock. Just like your clock in your computer runs your day and manages that, your highest blood pressure, when you should have a bowel movement, when you should eat, sunshine, all of those things are all entrained to that clock. So there's a whole lot that is going on and telling you that clock. The power of knowing your circadian rhythm or that profile for you, which is genetically driven, although you can influence it, like I said, on different routines and rituals. You can also know when you're at your cognitive best. So a morning person is definitely going to be ready to go in the morning. They're going to work out, have a better performance from a workout or even just from work, email, producing something cognitively in the morning. Much more creative in that sort of late afternoon. Night owls are kind of the opposite. They kind of ramp up slower into their day. And so like sort of that late morning, early afternoon, they're going to be more creative as they start out, and then they're going to get more serious and better to do higher cognitive self later. They may even work into the evening because that feels good. And so it's also for them, they can also work out in the evening. But if as a morning person, you're working out before you want to go to bed, that's often in conflict. So it's where understanding what are those behaviors and how do they match with what you're trying to do. And obviously, the more you understand and get to that sort of what are your pillars that work for you, the more you can play around with those variables and kind of create that consistent. Easy sleep sounds crazy to someone that doesn't sleep, but it really can become that sort of predictable even when you travel or do other things. And that's where a lot of the athletes I work with, obviously different hotel rooms every night, it seems unpredictable, different schedules, different games at different times. But as babies, we learn how to sleep wherever and whenever. And if we can remember how to sleep as a baby and train ourselves with certain rituals and certain parts of sleep, that's where breathing, what you do, what you think about, what you listen to. You talked about light and sound being those consistent factors for you. You can take that on the road anywhere. And when you combine that with sort of other powerful triggers, you can create consistency wherever you go. You can go longer without food than you can without sleep. So after losing sleep and you get into that 24 hours, you hallucinate so bad, your brain actually starts to break itself down. World peace will be solved with everyone sleeping better.
When you're sleep